Yeah.
Christchurch.
Oh my God. It's fine. All right, thank you everybody for coming to the weekly weather briefings. Sorry that last week we had to move downstairs, but we figured out the technical issues, so we're back up here. So we have Tyler Royce from Accuweather, and I'm sure he's going to talk a little bit about Irma. And
probably ruined my surprise. I was really going to come and talk about Europe, but apparently this thing in the Atlantic has taken over. And I actually had stuff to talk about in Europe. Interesting side note, I'm going to first start with a brief note. In all this Irma talk, the UK Met issued their storm names that they're going to use for the winter and into 2018 yesterday. That kind of snuck through. They issued it during the European Meteorological Society annual meeting that's taking place right now in Dublin. But these are the various names that you might hear that are going to impact the either Ireland or the UK. So I just wanted to start off with that. Some of them are very interesting, like if we ever get to W, it's Winifred. How I'm going to do today's discussion is we're going to first take a look at the local weather. I'll do a brief forecast through the weekend, and then I'm going to spend much of the time on what everyone is talking about, Hurricane Irma, and is it going to go up the east coast of Florida, or is it going to do something that we're not anticipating? Current conditions right now is that we're essentially from here on down to Philadelphia, where we have the most sunny. We have breaks in the clouds. You go up to the north and west, and looking at the Alps here, generally overcast. It's actually quite nice outside compared to the rain that we've been dealing with. 63 here, but we go up all the way, let's see, to Bradford's 56, 55 in Buffalo. And on the side note, the thunderstorms that came through here on Tuesday, woke me up from my nap. But when I was walking yesterday on Tall Trees Avenue, I didn't anticipate this, but there was actually a cloud-to-ground lightning strike that struck a tree and actually shattered it, sending some of the tree good 10 to 30 yards radius out from where it was. That included parts of it and the median of a road. So the thunderstorms, as I thought they were going to be innocent, were very gusty, very potent that came through here. Satellite just kind of showing that much of the sunnier weather, essentially from here on to the southwest, you're getting all the clouds to start to build up with daytime heating and with the general trough that's over us. So if you take a look briefly of what we can expect for the next few hours, essentially we're going to see some spotty showers kind of develop throughout the afternoon. Will one hit here? Well, it's 50 shot that one will hit here, and hopefully it doesn't when I'm taking my walk later. But essentially, we could probably see some pop-up showers essentially across the state, mainly in the north and west of us. There would probably be the best chance for that, and then some more organized rain looks like to be near Erie, associated with trough later tonight. So going forward, we have this nice big trough that's essentially over us, once again keeping us seasonally cool. People who are looking for some September heat, you have to continue to wait. I know there are a few co-workers who are dying to get out of this pattern that we're in. But as we continue on, this trough kind of lingers through into Saturday, but much of the northerly, northwesterly flow will kind of end by Friday. So any threat for spotty showers that continues into Saturday look to diminish, and that's very good because I don't believe we want to be wet yet again in Beaver Stadium. Don't think that'll be much fun. But essentially, as the trough slowly moves out, high pressure builds in, and going for those going to the game will be nice, and for those who are heading to the meteor picnic on Sunday, also looks to be nice. Apparently is the popular day for picnics, as I know that several others are occurring that day. So it'll be nice with high pressure and a nice northerly wind. So it'll keep temperatures on the cooler side, 60s. It'll feel closer to 70 during the game. with a light northerly wind. Any questions with short-term forecasts into the weekend?
Yeah, go back to 18Z Saturday. I know everybody's saying it's going to be nice for the game. I'm just having a hard time figuring out how that 500 millibar pattern right on top of us, that to me looks like a sunny morning, the clouds up in the afternoon. I know the models don't have any rain. Somebody explain to me why that doesn't pop a shower in Pennsylvania 15 minutes before kickoff. I just want to know. Tell me why I'm wrong. Could that pop a shower, at least in northern Pennsylvania, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon? John Kerr, what do you say?
Well, I think it's going to at least be cloudy.
Yeah, I mean,
it's going to be a cyclonic path, and that's cloudy. So clouds can produce showers. I wouldn't want to say it couldn't happen.
Just looks so cold aloft.
And that was actually a concern of the announcer of Beaver Stadium earlier this week, that we could see he was concerned that there could be a shower around game time or sometime Saturday afternoon.
Earlier in the week, it looked like that trough had moved farther east by game time, but then that slowed down. I agree, Sunday's a great day. Sunday's a beauty. Well, if you live in Pennsylvania, which is a nice segue for you.
Yes. So as of right now, as you probably all know, Irma is still a Category 5 hurricane. And one point I'm going to make mention now is that it's moving at 14 knots. This should be very key to future. What I'm going to bring up later is when that important turning of Irma is going to happen and how the models are struggling with it. Case in point, if you remember Hurricane Matthew, last year it said the models kept saying it was going to turn, it was going to turn, and Matthew ended up, I believe, going about 50 to 100 miles further to the east before turning. The reason why, Matthew was booking it before finally slowing down. And remember, this is a huge storm here. You see some tweets going out that it's the size of, it's bigger than Ohio, or it's bigger than this state or that state. So you have to slow this huge monster down. It's very much like slowing a full-on train down to a crawler or a tractor trailer going on. So you have to slow it down before you're finally able to turn.
I saw one that said it was as big as Jupiter.
That's how you see that.
Did you see that one?
Yes, I did.
Jupiter.
So that is going to be the whole key. And if we use past history, the turning of the models have been really struggling with the turning point. And I remember a tweet, I think it's from one of the Mets down in Houston. It's only going to be, the models are going to really struggle here, and it's all going to be a difference of 5 to 10 miles of where what one model says and when it's actually going to turn. And where you can actually predict that is still, we're still not very good at that. Here at 18Z Saturday, we still have it just north of Cuba. And it's still going to be a strong Category 4, maybe a lower weak Category 5. Some stats, if you haven't heard about how just strong Irma is, it is in terms of, and this comes from Dr. Phil Kolotzbach from Colorado State. So I did not go digging around for these facts. These came to us at work. But what is the one I wanted to? 185 mile per hour max winds for 33 straight hours. It's the longest any cyclone around the globe has maintained in history. This beats the previous record of Super Typhoon Haiyan in the Northwest Pacific, which only was at 24 hours. And that led to devastation across parts of the Philippines. So that was the benchmark out in the Western Pacific, and this is just totally obliterated it. It is the first Category 5 hurricane since Hurricane Matthew, and it is the first Category 5 hurricane in the tropical Atlantic since Hugo in 1989. Another fact to bring out with this is, it is been 102 years since 2 Category 4 storms had hit the United States in any same year. So any Category 4 or higher. So it's been over a century since we've had that. We've had, and then we go even further, we go to 1955. You had Hurricane Connie and Ione both reached in Category 4 status before coming ashore along the East Coast, but they both landed as a Category 2 storm. So very interesting notes along with that. The last time we had 3 hurricanes going on at the same time, we gotta go back to September 16th, 2010. That's 7 years ago when I was a junior. Here, just to throw that out there to my former professors. So it's been a while. We've been in a drought for a while in terms of hurricanes. That started with Harvey becoming Category 4, major hurricane striking the United States, and Irma is just kind of, as someone pointed out on Twitter, that's just, you have one storm that kind of opens up the boat, and when you kind of have that happen, you kind of get everything happening at once. Instead of like, oh, you get a major hurricane every 3 years, it kind of happens in clusters, very much like you get those big winter storms that some of us really care about. So just looking at the GFS, and yes, it has been the worst in its 4 to 5 day errors out of all the global models. The best is the ECMWF, and second best is actually the UK Met. So the UK Met is the second best, and finally, if we keep going down all the various models out there, and you have the GFS is near the bottom with the day 4 and 5 errors. And let's remember, those errors are still huge. We're talking about 175 mile error, 200 mile error with day 5. These are just some of the various ensembles. Just plot them. All the ones on the far right are Jose. I can't really click on one storm and focus, but they all have Irma staying to the north of Hispaniola, which, if it was to go be closer to Hispaniola, Irma will definitely weakened, because interacting with the mountains that go west to east would have essentially weakened it as it's being interacted with the terrain. But it should, for the most part, the core of it should remain to the north of Hispaniola. But as it approaches Cuba, it's going to, for the track itself, the core center is going to, for the most part, remain to the north. As I mentioned earlier, it's that turning point. I do know that the European is, at least the ZRZ was still on its, moving further to the west, hitting more directly South Florida, and then coming back out into the Atlantic. The GFS kind of grazes, and looking at the 12s, we can see, last I knew, the ZRZ kind of grazed Miami and then up the East Coast. Once again, the GFS kind of grazes Miami and continues it. Potentially, at least the ZRZ's first landfall was going to be in South Carolina, which is climatologically what typically happens. But as usual, that is climatology, and we can have one extreme or another extreme that can go off and do whatever it wants to do in terms of that. So just because climatology says one thing, it necessarily doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's the best guess going to. So it looks like, at least the ZRZ European had Irma faster, it kind of sped it up, impacting Florida, making landfall around 12 Sunday morning compared to later in the day, which the GFS here looks like also is around 12-18Z is impacting and battering the Miami area. The core is going to be Miami area, and then finally coming up into somewhere between like Savannah and Charleston, and then finally it'll weaken and it'll try to come up the East Coast next week, or the eastern part of the United States with that. Any questions? I kind of want to now kind of open it, because I know there's the big discussion on Twitter, there's big, even at work, it's the big discussion of when is it going to turn, and such like that. So I kind of wanted to foster a kind of discussion for the last few minutes of this.
Well, you mentioned the momentum of a big system taking it westward. Could you also argue the faster it moved, the more influence that trough to the north might have on it, trying to turn it farther east?
That's very true, very true. And it keeps plowing, and if it doesn't get, as I said, it's not going to interact very much with Hispaniola. The center of it very much could start to turn east much earlier because of the interaction with the trough. And one point that was brought up at work, as I was trying to overhear, was yes, we have that nice high pressure out in the middle of the Atlantic. As it turns and goes up to Florida, the wind field is actually going to expand as we have that with the high pressure off to the west.
I left work at midnight last night. I was one of the things going through my mind. The drop was pretty strong.
Yeah, that's the one thing that we can thank for is the balloons that they've been sending up much of the week in the Midwest every 6 hours to help with the models here, trying to depict how this trough is going to be, knowing that it was going to be a very key player here. I'm not sure how often that has been the case in years past when such a big storm was coming our way.
Almost any scenario, whether it's straight on the south or the more likely event, it won't want to cross the coast. They don't like to, but it's going to head close to Miami. And we've had a fetch across the Atlantic now for quite a long time from the east-northeast in the ocean. We just missed a full moon. But I haven't heard any discussion much about, other than it might be a 10 or 11 foot storm surge. In history, there have been a lot of hurricanes in Florida, but nothing has hit Miami Beach since 1926, if I'm not mistaken. So it seems like almost any scenario is going to deliver a pretty good storm surge in there. Anybody got anything on that? How much exposure there is? What are the normal tides now? The tides are small there. I don't think the moon is going to. It's going to be too late for the moon.
And that's probably what's the saving grace.
Yeah.
One of my notes said that if we were closer to the full moon,
Yeah.
the inundation, which is the tide plus storm surge, would be much higher. But now that we're going towards the new moon,
that won't affect it.
Of course, there's been plenty of evidence recently. It floods on clear days in Miami Beach.
Right. Yeah. I had a friend many years ago. Hardly any friends left. Except those present. Who owned land on Miami Beach in 1926. And it was some weeks before he could even get over to see it. And we did. The evidence on the palm trees was that the water had been something like 10 to 12 feet deep. And so he let the land go for taxes. He didn't bother to pay the taxes. It was rather a bad financial mistake. 25 years later, it was selling by the foot. But at that time, there were no bridges or anything like that. But anyway, it's been almost 100 years since a big surge has come in there, and this one looks like it could do it.
What did Andrew do for surge the southern part of town?
I'm sorry?
What did Andrew do for surge back?
Andrew passed in across Homestead,
Yeah,
which is a southern suburb of Miami.
south of the main beach island entirely.
8 feet.
I'm wondering how big the surge got.
I don't really know, but I don't think it was.
I have those numbers. It wasn't extravagant.
I didn't think it was.
and it paled in comparison to what the wind did.
Yeah. But you look at the flood zones for, you know, a 10 or 15 foot surge, and it gets pretty much everything south of the, into Cutler Ridge, and everything east of Cutler Ridge.
And one of the big threats, I think, could be the inland flooding in Florida as well. I mean, I was down there this summer actually working at the Hurricane Center, and just from experience, you get a few inches of rain there and everything starts ponding up pretty quickly. The Hurricane Center itself is actually built up a couple feet off the ground for that exact same reason, for that big threat from inland flooding. But yeah, just downtown Miami, you get rivers, little streams of water going down the streets, and you get a little bit of training on those kind of storms. So I can't imagine you add surge on top of that, it could be a serious problem.
Where's the Hurricane Center at the moment?
It's at Florida International University near downtown Miami, so it's kind of west, going along the Dolphin Expressway.
It's on the mainland?
Yeah, it's on the mainland. It's probably 30 minutes drive to the beach, so it will have direct impacts for sure. They can handle such a storm, but it'll be kind of putting it to its test if they do get a direct hit from this.
Any other questions or comments?
I was gonna say, I think some of the surge might depend on how quickly it wants to make that turn, because some of the models have it coming in and then it kind of, not like becomes stationary, but it like slows down a lot before it starts to turn north, and if it does that, it has time to build up more water.
Yeah, I can't see a 90-degree turn being done at speed. And if we're going to do it at speed, it would be a broad sweeping turn, and all the models seem to kink it. So it's got to come to an almost complete halt and then accelerate out on the half. If it does that over Miami, fine. But yeah, I've seen 3 feet of rain there out of an MCC, and yes, it gets wet, but it runs off. There's an ocean relatively close. Yeah, so I think even if you parked it in rain like that, it's not quite a Houston, which is ocean closer. The land it isn't tall, but it's steep. You lose that 15 feet pretty darn quick. So the main question is just, do you blow it away or storm surge it away?
A comment also, it was mentioned, I forget who mentioned it, but the Sunny Day flooding in Miami, it's becoming more and more common because of sea levels rising there on average. And so roughly speaking, Miami sea levels are about a foot higher than they were about 100 years ago. So even with the progression from the full moon to the new moon and how that might not impact the tides as much, it still might be worse than it otherwise would have been with the sea levels being a foot higher. Also, I got to take a look at the new 12Z GFS and the CMC, and they're both a little more progressive with the trough. And the new CMC actually does take Irma into the spine of Florida, so that's about a 50-mile shift to the west compared to the previous set of model runs.
Any other comments?
Anything else? All right, thank you, Tyler. And if you're interested, the Campus Weather Service is going to have a discussion also on Irma, and that'll be at 126, Willard, 26 Hosler, 26 Hosler tonight at 6 p.m. So everyone's welcome, faculty, staff, employees of Accuweather, anyone can come, and we'll be talking more about Irma and showing models. And there will be free pizza.
Last week with the approach of harvest, so the long